According to multiple reports, India's Reliance Industries, led by billionaire Mukesh Ambani, made a staggering 724 million euros from Russian oil in 2024. But this story isn't just about profit. Western sanctions were meant to cripple Moscow's war chest by squeezing revenues, raising costs, and forcing the Kremlin to consider backing out of Ukraine. Yet loopholes and alternative markets kept enough money flowing to sustain the war. And Reliance emerged as a key hub, keeping Russian oil moving and, in turn, helping to fuel Putin's war machine. So how did India's richest man turn sanctions into opportunity? Before we get to that, we need to first understand how the sanctions on Russia created the loophole Ambani took advantage of. Almost all global oil shipments need insurance and tankers, and Western countries, especially the UK and EU, control most of the system. Using that leverage, the West only allowed Russia access to their ships if it sells its oil below a price cap of $60 a barrel. Before the war, that same oil was selling for around $75 to $80. Now, to put that into perspective, a standard oil tanker carries around 1 to 2 million barrels of crude. At $80 a barrel, a full tanker would bring in about $160 million. But at the capped price of $60, that same shipment only makes $120 million. That's a loss of $40 million per voyage. Money Russia no longer pockets. $40 million less to spend on the war machine. Oil and gas are Russia's biggest income source, supplying about 10% of the world's oil. A total ban would have caused prices everywhere to skyrocket, so instead, the $60 per barrel cap forced Russia to sell at a discount. That's where oil moguls like Ambani saw an opportunity. While many Western countries stopped buying Russian oil entirely, oil giants like Ambani's Reliance Industries stepped in, buying Russian crude at bargain prices and refining it into petrol, diesel, and jet fuel, then selling it on the global market at normal prices. Reliance's Jamnagar refinery complex in Gujarat is the largest in the world, with a processing capacity of about 1.2 million barrels of crude oil per day. Now, imagine they buy Russian crude at a $25 discount per barrel compared to world prices. That is $30 million in savings or extra profits from 1.2 million barrels, which the refinery can process in a single day. Within months, India went from a minor buyer to one of Russia's largest customers. India's oil purchases from Russia grew nearly 19-fold from 0.1 to 1.9 million barrels a day, while China's rose by 50% to 2.4 million barrels a day.
I know part of what the administration has done has tried to make it tougher for Russia to be able to sell its oil. It cracked down pretty tough on India, which is importing a lot of Russian oil, but not so much when it comes to China. Is China in the wrong for importing so much Russian oil as well? I think they import just as much as India does.
Oh, well, let's go back and look at the history, though, Becky. And look, China importing it is suboptimal, but if you go back and look pre-22, pre-invasion, 13% of China's oil was already coming from Russia. Now it's 16, so China has a diversified input of their oil. If you go back and look now, I believe India had less than 1% of their oil, 1%, and now I believe it's up to 42. So
wow.
India is just profiteering, or they are just profiteering. They are reselling. They've made $16 billion in excess profits, some of the richest families in India. So this is a completely different thing. Like this Indian, what I would call the Indian arbitrage, buying cheap Russian oil, reselling it as product, has just sprung up during the war, which is unacceptable.
In December of 2024, Reliance struck a major long-term deal with Rosneft, a Russian state oil firm, to import approximately 500,000 barrels per day of crude for 10 years, worth about $13 billion per year. That is upwards of $30 million worth of crude per day. For Reliance Industries, it translated into record profits. As India's biggest exporter, a big chunk of the refined products is exported and sold to buyers in Asia, Africa, and sometimes even Europe. The rest is sold in India's domestic market through Reliance's retail fuel outlets and partnerships. Reliance exports refined products even to countries that sanction Russian crude because once it's refined, the origin of the oil is basically laundered. Meaning, when crude is bought from Russia but refined in India, the origin of the end product becomes India. A barrel of diesel or jet fuel from Jamnagar doesn't carry a Russian flag on it anymore. The West's goal with the price cap was to squeeze Russia's income and force Putin to give up the war. But unfortunately, the financial pressure on Russia has been weaker than intended. Even with discounts, Russia continues to sell oil in huge volumes to Indian and Chinese buyers, drawn in by the prospect of making a substantial profit. Oil and gas make up around 40% of Russia's federal revenue, so discounted sales still translated into missiles, tanks, and soldiers on the battlefield in Ukraine. For Ukraine, buying Russian oil equates to a longer war, more deaths, more bombs on their cities, and more displacement of people. For Ambani, it translates into billions of dollars in extra profit, a larger share of the global oil trade, and a boost to his status as Asia's richest man. To understand how Reliance got here, it's worth taking a look at Mukesh Ambani's background. He was educated at St. Xavier's College in Mumbai, and Ambani went on to earn a degree in chemical engineering from the Institute of Chemical Technology. He later enrolled in an MBA program at Stanford University, but withdrew in 1980 to return to India and help his father expand Reliance, which at the time was a small but fast-growing enterprise. Under Mukesh Ambani, Reliance Industries grew from India's largest private company into a global conglomerate, expanding into petrochemicals, retail, telecom, digital services, and ventures like Jio, BP, Disney, Nvidia, AI, and defense. Ambani isn't just known for business. His lifestyle has made headlines worldwide. His residence, Antilia, is a 27-story skyscraper in Mumbai valued at over $1 billion. Complete with 3 helipads, a 168-car garage, multiple swimming pools, a private cinema, and a snow room simulating sub-zero temperatures. Nearly 600 staff work around the clock to keep it running. In 2024, Forbes India estimated Mukesh Ambani's net worth at $119.5 billion. Now, as India's biggest buyer of Russian oil, that number is expected to go even higher. However, the lucrative trade with Russia hasn't come without its own challenges. In August 2025, President Trump issued an executive order imposing an extra 25% tariff on Indian goods entering the US because of India's continued import of Russian oil. This was stacked on top of an already existing 25% reciprocal tariff, bringing the total up to 50% on many Indian exports.
What sort of impact is this going to have, Michelle?
Look, I think it's going to be very significant. You're talking about a 50% tariff come September on goods imported between a huge country that had, at some point, hoped to secure a trade deal with America. If you look at what the executive order says, the president goes on to say he had received additional information from various senior officials on the actions of the Russian government with respect to the situation in Ukraine, saying that given the national security risks involved, it justified this new tariff.
Beyond that, some ships carrying Russian crude bound for India have been diverted under U.S. sanction pressure. Besides calling the U.S. decision to impose additional tariffs unfair and unreasonable, India argues that its energy procurement, including Russian oil, is driven by the need to secure affordable energy for its 1.4 billion citizens and is guided by national interest and market dynamics.
We are not the country which has the biggest trade surge with Russia after 2022. I think there are some countries to the south. We are a country where actually the Americans said for the last few years that we should do everything to stabilize the world energy markets, including buying oil from Russia. Incidentally, we also buy oil from America, and that amount has been increasing. So, quite honestly, we are very perplexed.
Some have argued that the US and the EU are also Russia's trading partners. As it stands right now, Indian refineries are still buying Russian oil at a massive scale, with Ambani's Reliance conglomerate at the forefront. India is also pushing for self-reliance and strengthening trade with other blocs to offset US pressure. On September 5th, Trump made a Truth Social post that said, "Looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China. May they have a long and prosperous future together." Whether that will be the case in the near or far future, we're yet to find out.